What Israel did by taking that action against Iran was escalate what is already an incredibly fragile situation, didn't it?
Sangita, that's an outrageous framing of the reality.
It's not an outrageous framing. I've just been speaking to somebody who is a diplomat to Iran from the UK government. That's not an outrageous framing of it.
The sort of voluntary relocation of many Jewish people during the Holocaust, I imagine. It is not voluntary relocation.
Shame on you for that comparison.
Let us please...
That's a shameful anti-Semitic equation.
Let us please...
You brought up the analogy of the black gentleman, and I responded with an accurate situation that had happened this morning. We are out of time, but thank you very much indeed for joining.
Suggestion
no, I didn't. It was actual a matter
and you know what?
of fact.
I'd like
Thanks for
to
joining
ask,
us on
like
the programme. Let's bring in the...
Hello, so today I am going to talk about two brave journalists who may have fallen victim to dirty Israeli lobbying. They are Belle Donati, who used to present shows on Sky News until January, and then Sangita Myska, my former BBC colleague, who has been presenting shows on LBC every weekend and has earned plaudits for all the right reasons, for her brave journalism. I mean, I call it brave, which should be expected from every journalist. But because journalism has become so corrupt that, even following the basic ethos of journalism makes us feel proud of, our action. So Sangita Myska has been doing a brilliant job on LBC, particularly during the Gaza crisis. And Belle Donati was another TV journalist who earned people's respect and praises until she disappeared from Sky News. Now, the reason why I'm talking about these two incredibly brave women in my profession is because there is a lot of conversation going on social media surrounding these two brave ladies. And their sudden mysterious disappearances from their media platforms. Belle Donati from Sky News and Sangita Myska from LBC. Now there is a context to it, and the common context is that these two women have disappeared from their respective platforms, after they gave grief to Israeli propagandists in their interviews. Let's talk about Belle Donati in January, and we did a story as well on that. So she interviewed Israeli propagandist who also happens to be an MP, member of parliament, Danny Danon. Very annoying personality indeed. I'm glad that I've never had a chance to interview him because a mere sight of him makes you, feel very... it's very nauseating, very nauseating. So anyway, she interviewed him, and the problem with, as is the case with the Israeli propagandists, that they can't stand the truth and they don't like being challenged. They like people who are pliable, who just go along with whatever they have to say, and they are never kind of pushed back. In this case, it didn't happen. He was reminded about his previous suggestion of forcing Palestinians to accept voluntary migration from their mainland, from their native land to foreign countries. Belle Donati said that this was tantamount to ethnic cleansing, because why would you force somebody to accept voluntary migration from their native land? It's their land. That's where they were born, and that's where their forefathers lived, and generations after generations they lived there. Why should they be forced out of their own land by people who actually came and stole their land? He didn't like it. He didn't like the fact that it was being compared to ethnic cleansing. And he said this is very acceptable, way of asking people to accept voluntary migration. To which Belle Donati said that would it have been acceptable even in the case of Jewish people during the Holocaust? Now that was, to me as a journalist, was a perfect analogy to play devil's advocate, because if somebody is coming up with such a bizarre and outrageous argument, I think you need to push him back, by countering and by drawing parallel to something that has happened historically involving their particular race. Now, he didn't like it, and as is the case, he started accusing Belle Donati of anti-Semitism. Now, that happened and the video went viral. You can see this video again here.
Yes, you've made your point. You've also departed from the original question. Let's just take you back to these. One of the provisional measures is about the incitement.
I can see that. We will eradicate Hamas.
Right, okay, yes, absolutely. You've doubled down on those public comments. You've called for a voluntary migration of Palestinians from Gaza. In November, you co-authored a piece that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. You suggested the ethnic cleansing of some of Gaza's population to Western countries
Wilfred,
that would accept the refugees. The exact quote from that article, one idea is for countries around the world to accept limited numbers of Gazan families who have expressed a desire to relocate. Do you stand by those statements?
I will not allow it. Ethnic cleansing, that's a word you used. If you read my article, I spoke about voluntary immigration.
I read that article. I did read that article, and I've just quoted from it.
Let me remind you that you spoke about ethnic cleansing. I spoke about voluntary immigration. And I think anyone in the world who voluntarily wants to move to another country should be eligible to do that. But you know what? It's not the first time that we hear those allegations.
The sort of voluntary relocation of many Jewish people during the Holocaust, I imagine. It is not voluntary relocation.
Shame on you for that comparison.
Let us please
go to the
subjective.
I will not allow you to speak about the Holocaust.
You said earlier.
This is pure anti-Semitism, what you just said.
Mr. Danon,
the Holocaust to what's happening today in Gaza.
Mr. Danon, you talked about eradicating Hamas.
Shame on you for this behavior. Shame on you for this equation. You should apologize for what you just said on record about the Holocaust. How can you even compare that?
Now, the video went viral, and that was it. That was the last time we saw Belle Donati on Sky News, because the guy followed it back. He wrote a very damning letter to Sky News management, and not even implying, not even being pretentious about it, he demanded her ouster and sacking from the Sky News. He demanded. This was his letter. You can see on the screen. This was the letter he wrote, and he asked Sky News management to sack her for just doing her duty as a journalist, as an upright journalist. And since then, we haven't seen Belle Donati on Sky News. There has been lots of conversation on social media. Her Instagram is now private, so you can't see anything, any of her activities there. On Twitter, she has not posted anything since then, since that episode. And Sky News, by the way, apologized to that propagandist for Belle Donati's behavior. I mean, if anything, she should have been rewarded for being a courageous journalist, but no, she was punished, and Sky News appeared to be embarrassed about her action, and since then we have not seen. So that was the case of Belle Donati. Now we are faced with a similar situation involving another journalist called Sangita Myska, who worked in the BBC at the same time when I was the editor of BBC Asian Network. Our paths crossed. We don't know each other, but yeah, we had the pleasure of working at the same time in the BBC. Now, lately, I have been very impressed by her, shows and the way she grilled her guest by following the basic ethos of journalism. Now, she was also involved in interviewing another Israeli propagandist on this occasion, right in the immediate aftermath of Israel attacking an Iranian consulate in Syria, which prompted Iran to launch a military strike on Israel, and it was a big news, massive news at that time. Now, this propagandist comes there, and he was challenged as to why Iran had no right to attack Israel, given the fact that Israel had threatened its sovereignty, because as you know, that diplomatic mission is considered a part of an extension of your sovereign territory. Now, he didn't like the fact. He kept saying that no, it wasn't a consulate, and Sangita Myska kept pushing him back, with facts. He didn't like it. You can see that he was very, very uncomfortable. Just watch the video first.
What the Iranians, of course, have said is that this is a retaliatory strike after Israel struck its consulate in Syria. Now, we all know that the way diplomacy works is consulates and embassies are considered sovereign territory of the government that is concerned. What Israel did by taking that action against Iran was escalate what is already an incredibly fragile situation.
Sangita, that's an outrageous framing of the reality.
It's not an outrageous framing. I've just been speaking to somebody who is a diplomat to Iran from the UK government. That's not an outrageous framing of it. What Israel did was strike what is considered in diplomatic circles the sovereign territory of Iran, whether we like it or not. No. And there was undoubtedly going to be a blowback. So did Israel game out what was going to happen next?
Firstly, I'm not going to speak directly to that strike. What I can say definitively, and this is why it's outrageous, I can say definitively is that wasn't an embassy, it wasn't a consulate, it wasn't any type of diplomatic mission.
It's been widely reported as that.
Because that's what Iran says. Because that's what Iran says. So would you like to copy and paste?
Are you suggesting every single news organization in the world has got that wrong?
Now, since then, Sangita has not been seen on her radio station. She presents her show over the weekend. She has not been seen. Now, there have been, as expected, a lot of conversation on social media about her sudden and mysterious disappearance, and she has not chosen to respond to that. However, on Instagram, she's been quite active and she's been posting photos and videos of her escapades in London. One of her posts caption read that shaken but not stirred. You can see that on the screen. Now, reacting to that post, one of her friends maybe or followers asked her about whether she was okay, to which she responded that I'm fine and I can't say much at the moment. Clearly, there is something that has happened to her in the aftermath of that uncomfortable interview that she did with an Israeli propagandist. So these two women we know have been, allegedly punished for just doing basic duty as journalists. For Sangita Myska, an online campaign has been launched by her supporters who have demanded that LBC reinstate her as soon as possible. So that's where we are, and we will wait for Sangita to come out and tell the full story as to what has happened, whether there is any truth behind the reports of her sacking for giving grief to an Israeli propagandist, or there is something else. We will wait for her to come and tell us this story. Now, the third person who is now being talked about, who may have to meet the same fate, is Kay Burley. As you know, the Kay Burley has been incredibly impressive with her interviews on the Gaza crisis. She was the one who was giving grief to David Cameron, if you remember, in the immediate aftermath of Iranian retaliatory attacks on Israel.
A reckless and dangerous thing for Iran to have done. And I think the whole world can see all these countries that have somehow wondered, well, what is the true nature of Iran? It's there in black and white.
What would Britain do if a hostile nation flattened one of our consulates?
Well, we would take the very strong action.
And Iran would say that that's what they did?
Well, what they did, as I said, was a massive attack.
So they were right to respond, but they overreacted, is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the attack they carried out was on a very large scale, much bigger than people accepted.
They have a right to respond?
Well, countries have a right to respond when they feel they've suffered an aggression. Of course they do. But look at the scale of that response. Had those weapons not been shot down,
respond, but they just overreacted.
And then Gideon Fulton.
Just to clarify, Mr. Falter, you brought up the analogy of the black gentleman, and I responded with an accurate situation that had happened this morning. We are out of time, but thank you very much indeed for joining.
Suggestion
no, I didn't. It was actual a matter
and you know what?
of fact. Thanks for joining us on the programme.
Let's
bring in the former Met.
In the end, he had to leave the channel disappointed because he wasn't allowed to carry out his propaganda on the show that was being presented by Kay Burley. So now, and then the more recently, Kay Burley was interviewing an Israeli politician and literally exposed her lies because the topic was the discovery of mass graves in Gaza, and these Israeli politicians, as you know, their argument is based on lies, and they expect the journalists to just follow their lies, blindly without questioning. Kay Burley did not do so. She decided to challenge that.
At least 283 corpses found in a mass grave at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The UN Human Rights Chief has said he is absolutely horrified. Who do you think those bodies are?
Probably terrorists, because the ratio of combatant to innocent that Israel has is unprecedented in modern warfare. We know we've killed about 15,000 terrorists. There was a terrible battle in those areas. So the chances are...
How do you think these people died?
In gun battles with Israel.
Why do you think some of the bodies were found with ties around their hands?
Well, because we probably arrested the terrorists.
And then killed them.
Well, I don't know if the terrorists fought back. I wasn't there. But all I can tell you is that this has been a very difficult urban warfare, that nobody on earth has experienced this type of warfare, where the terrorists are hiding in tunnels, where they're cowards because they won't face their enemy. They just leave innocent people up there whilst they hide in tunnels that are bigger than the London Underground. And they come out, they shoot, and it could be that many of them were shot and they were shooting in a battle. And it could be that there were bombs thrown by them and grenades. There could be a million different scenarios of why these were found. But remember, we're in the middle of a war.
I just to clarify for me, if you would, how do they fight back with their hands tied behind their backs?
Well, we don't know what they were doing before their hands were tied behind their backs, do we?
No, but if you've managed to cable tie them, they shouldn't,
yes, and maybe,
shouldn't subsequently find them dead, should we?
And maybe, again, we're just conjecturing. Maybe his friend threw a grenade, and then what happens? Maybe there was a missile, maybe they threw a rocket, and then what happens? Again, this is conjecture. I wasn't there, you weren't there. We can't know. All I know is that our army has the highest...
Neither was Amnesty International, and they say there's been a lack of access for human rights investigators.
It's a shame that they're not worried about the lack of access to hostages who haven't been visited.
Come on to hostages in a moment. That's also on my list to talk to you. But what would you say to Amnesty International saying there's been a lack of access for human rights investigators?
So now there are fears that Kay Burley could be facing the same kind of treatment as the two ladies, Belle Donati and Sangita Myska, have faced, on their respective platforms. We will see. We hope that this doesn't happen. But nonetheless, the Gaza crisis has shown one thing, that if you do your job as a journalist properly and hold Israel to account for its war crimes and for its crimes against humanity, and you are affiliated with a reputed organization, your days are numbered. Your days are numbered. And if you are an independent journalist like me, then of course, there are efforts and attempts being made all the time to limit your reach on the social media platforms so that your voice doesn't reach far to as many people as you want. So yeah, these are the what we call professional hazards of the current crisis. So that's why it's important for you guys to keep sharing these videos widely. Do not remain a mute spectator. If you really want to counter the lies of mainstream media, you need to, play active role in amplifying the reach of these videos. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.